Chapter 40. Rumors were flying outside the dazzling glass edifice of Corps headquarters. About 50 feet from the entrance, the steps of the intimate amphitheater were heaving with the press, each jostling their neighbor, posturing for a chance to ask the perfect question. Even their drones seemed to be competing for space as they hummed above the crowd. Eventually, the front doors opened and a team of employees fanned out, moving like a trained security unit. "See that?" Margaret asked, nudging Tom, busy pecking at his phone screen. "Yeah, freaky. And corporations want us to believe they aren't taking over. Please." A moment later, the doors opened again, and Coraline strode out, flanked by Harold. Both wore dark formal wear and sunglasses. Coraline sported a black sun hat, which seemed more funeral-ish than major announcement-ish, but the crowd was unfazed. Harold had opted for a two-tone Tribly, show-off. The couple stopped in the middle of the raised central platform, waiting for them to quiet down. At the same time, Corps' in-house drones targeted their mouths with directional mics, broadcasting to nearby speakers. Harold took off his glasses, slid them into a breast pocket, and began the press release. "Thank you all for coming out today. As promised, we're about to unveil our latest innovation, which we feel will mark a new path for humanity." The reporters, so eager for anything dramatic, wondered what kind of juicy scandal might be unfolding in the batter of Harold's banal, vanilla bundt cake of a statement. "As you know, our company and companies like ours are constantly vying for monumental breakthroughs, not only in the communication and connectivity fields, but deeper than that. Our social interactions. Real life. Friends and family, right?" "Sex bots," one reporter whispered, elbowing her competitor playfully. "Well, I'm just a lowly spokesperson," Harold said, pretending he hadn't heard that. "But it is my great honor to introduce the woman of the hour. Not that she needs one. Coraline McCarthy." She smiled at him, waiting for the brief, tepid applause to die down. "Thank you, Harold. And I would like to thank all of you for coming out today. Well, I think we can all agree that at first launch, our CPT wearables were, admittedly, fugly and basic as hell." That got a laugh, as Coraline was known for her cavalier, no-nonsense, and sometimes salty deliveries. "But now they're sleek, small, and sometimes almost invisible. I'm happy to see a few Vertex Lite models in the crowd. Thank you for your purchases," she said, smiling. Coraline referred to the cranial pickup technology she had developed to interact with her subconscious. The first units had appeared on the market soon after she snapped her comm collar and refocused her energies. The silicone caps, embedded with room temperature superconductors, allowed increasingly nuanced data representations from and to the human mind. Turn on your lights with a picture in your head. Pull up a file in your device if you thought file. It was both novel and practical, which translated into highly profitable. The CPT could also induce brain states and stimulate any viable old memory, so vividly that the line between the present and the dreamlike remembrance was getting very blurry. And, of course, because humans can't have nice things, those abilities were a perfect match for the adult entertainment industry. Despite the naysayers, CPT actually started saving marriages. Couples could not only relive their steamiest sexual memories, but also purchase and spin up millions of others. And no matter how long a session felt, like it took when indulging in their fantasy scenarios, the CPT time distortion meant they could be done in an hour, cleaned up and ready for dinner. Coraline and others had made unspendable fortunes from direct sales, spin-offs, and tie-ins. But because she had open sourced the tech, each new iteration had rapidly moved her to this moment. This gathering, however, is about something related to, but radically different from that now outdated tech. And it is also one of the 2 reasons I am wearing this elegant hat, Coraline said excitedly. She could barely contain herself, knowing that billions of future customers and possibly some prospective recruits were watching her. So, without further ado, let's get to it, she said, reaching up and taking her hat off. Her shoulder-length, curly black hair spilled out, highlighted by the sun coming through a fast-moving cloud. Nice hair, but one of the reporters started in on her. Coraline nipped that shit right in the bud. Our new product is so much more than last year's CPT model. First off, it will be available free of charge, after signing your body weight and consent forms, of course. That really got them laughing. Free meant it must be some software, an old-school app, or something equally mundane. A few reporters actually lowered their phones, satisfied with just reviding another network's footage for a nominal fee. So much for juicy gossip. Coraline smiled, her chrome-gray lipstick sharpening to points at the edge of her mouth. Secondly, it will require an operation. Yes, you heard me right. An inpatient permanent augmentation. Neurosurgery, to be precise, which is why we call it the procedure. The phones flew back up like helium balloons, the reporters exploding with questions. She just held up a palm and waited. Silence fell again, but not one pair of eyes drifted, human or drone. And thirdly, hell, let me just introduce you. Sis, up. It was the way she had said it, her voice dropping a few octaves and gaining an edge. Then, as if she were a snake charmer, a 6-inch black tentacle-looking thing rose up out of its nest of wavy, glossy hair. Just like that, which is just like her, Harold thought with a broad, shit-eating grin. But what the fuck was the consensus amongst the reporters, as lenses zoomed so fast you'd think they'd break. So, questions? She asked, clasping her hands together. As she considered who to pick, the last inch of the tapered antenna, sprouting out of her head, lit up, shifting from black to a brilliant orange as it swayed in the wind. Again, they shouted over each other, shoving and elbowing. Coraline reveled at what she saw. Not the reporters, but augmented visuals and data feeds, seamlessly integrated into her native visual field. Gone were the scry glasses, comm collar, and CPT barrettes she used to wear. The only peripheral she would ever need again was winking at the dumbfounded crowd. Now, her cybernetic lock and brain were permanently interconnected. And Core was updating and refreshing the additional information and icons in real time. Everything within Coraline's purview was tagged and bagged by default. Each reporter's data was collapsed yet accessible as a field of headings and categories around them. With just a word or thought, lines and nodes of more profound knowledge would stretch off the primary identifiers, like tea flowers blooming in hot water. If anything was knowable, it was searchable and seeable. And all the colors. Core could render overlays in every accessible spectrum, using the intel from Coraline's lock. Patterns and nuances only available to other species were now hers. She could practically see through the bodies of all the reporters as their hearts pumped blood in fluorescent tints. Sis, reduce visuals 50%, please, Coraline thought, squinting at the dazzling array. The brilliance faded, throwing all their proverbial clothes back on as the crowd became more recognizably human. Coraline would have to tweak the contrasts and relations to available light. But that, as they say, was the easy part. Scanning their eager faces, she pointed to a woman in front left. Her head lit up from above average brain activity. Yes, Miss Valence, I believe, Coraline said to the newly minted reporter. How did you know my name? And what the heck is that? Another round of uneasy, sporadic laughter circulated as the initial shock of Coraline's reveal died down. Well, the second one first. As mentioned earlier, this is our proprietary cerebral implant, branded as Syslock. Inside this cybernetic appendage, or lock, Coraline said, making it pulse for effect, is my Sys, a standalone AI operating system. Like the AI on all our phones that help us with directions and online shopping. Its primary function, however, is to act as a bridge, a communications relay between human minds and our flagship product, Core, whom I hope you all use and love. Coraline said, smiling as she gave Harold a conspiratorial glance. Of course they used Core. And so did practically everyone on Earth in one way or another. Even the Luddites that railed against AI did so on devices that utilized core design components and optimizations. She was everywhere, in everything. But it also interacts with our hemodetoxification product, which I hope none of you have had to use, she said solemnly. Coraline tried to lead with a trusted, proven medical application before shocking them with the nanite fluid's full potential. She was so intelligent now that it was hard to fully gauge how humans would react to new data, especially this sort. Despite this ironic predicament, she tiptoed through the china shop of intellectual inequities as wisely and humbly as possible. But the confused look on the face of Miss Valence indicated it wasn't going to be easy. So that Locky thingy is an AI, but also a wireless antenna for another AI for Core? And it does what for your blood? Helps make it clean? I don't get it, the reporter said, innocently and honestly enough. No, you won't be one of those who get it. Sorry, my dear. You're bright for this bunch, but that's not saying a lot. That empty head of yours will never be graced by... Easy, Coraline. Stay on point. Yes, you're on the right track, but... Coraline began. How far is that thing jammed in your brain? Another reporter from a rag of ill repute shouted over her, prompting a rowdy outburst of belly laughs. Far enough, Coraline countered, her smile pulled a little tighter. But, as I was about to say, Jason Kemp, 4583 Red Rock Lane. Oh, sorry. Should I continue? His color drained into his shoes as he looked side to side with disbelief. The crowd muttered conspiratorial fears, but Coraline just went on. So, my lock Sys is amazing, Coraline said, pointing to the off-center blinking black tendril. But the real magic happens when it talks to Core, and as a team, they direct that same blood detoxifying formula to repair and enhance, well, all of me. The nanites we license to help clinicians combat substance abuse and household poisonings are no longer just tireless garbage collectors and tissue rejuvenators. Over the last couple of years, we have engineered them to provide a structured platform for fluid-based processing, effectively turning them into microscopic swimming abacuses, rudimentary computers, circulating inside our fragile human bodies, kicking tiny asses and taking tiny names. With their computational powers alone, the nanites add the equivalent of a second brain to my body, Coraline said, putting a hand on her hip. Geez, I guess that's why everyone calls me a smartass. That little unplanned joke landed nicely, loosening up the crowd a bit. Coraline forged ahead after interpreting the crowd's body language as still confused and concerned, but please go on. But with Core acting as a doting parent, and my sis's altruistic programming, the synergistic and compounding effects on my mental health, productivity, and adherence to the social contract are, well, truly amazing. As Coraline spoke, her enthusiasm shifted the tiny tentacle on her head from tangerine to lemon yellow, the tip growing a brilliant white. As it did, the reporters took a fearful step back, both from her words and alien appearance. So, as you can see, I am now an organic peripheral for an entirely silicon-based entity, for lack of a better word. My fluid computations and thoughts are available to Core, and in return, her AI engine and reality-augmenting capabilities are at my disposal. Together, we are one heck of a team, Coraline said, staring directly into one of her drone cameras. And our team is looking for more players. I would invite anyone who's watching who is excited about my little spiel to get in touch, or apply for one of our ongoing trials. The immensity of what she had told them was too much for any modified human to absorb. Some thought it was just a very elaborate publicity stunt, perhaps to drive up market shares. Others were disgusted by body modification, never mind the moving, glowing kind. But it had always been the others, the freaks, weirdos, and oddball geniuses that she wanted to reach anyway. Needed to find. To not be alone in this new frontier. So what, you think you're some kind of cyborg elite now? Jason said, his tone going from annoying to threatening. Huh? Everybody'll have to get wires in their heads, injected with tracking chips? Or what? Lose their jobs and social status? Get real, Eddie, he barked. Coraline's sis activated memories she had long forgotten, sensing a threat. It was a snippet from the jungle, Harold spotting a hidden gun. In an instant, Core had received the data from sis and redirected the drones to scan the belligerent man for a concealed weapon. Suddenly, Jason's firearm glowed in Coraline's display. A collection of bright red, shifting geometric shapes projected over his clothes and side holster underneath. Tisk, tisk. You know our company has a strict policy against any weapons on our grounds, don't you, Jason? Well, outside weapons anyway. The other reporters took a few weary steps away from him, unsure of Coraline's claim. But in her organic HUD, the flexed muscles of his right arm briefly glowed hotter than the rest of his body. He had thought about it, but something in his pea-brain had stayed his hand. Perhaps it was the not-so-subtle way Harold moved his hand to rest on his belt, revealing just a glint of a gun. Coraline was pretty good at cutting her losses these days. Although disappointed in the crowd's lackluster response, she felt it was an excellent first step towards easing her enhanced citizens into the public eye. Well, they say tell him, then tell him what you told him, but I say more news to come. Diminishing returns and all that, Coraline declared to the confused, frazzled, and oblivious crowd. Harold stifled a chuckle and shook his head, constantly amazed at her wasted wit. We are done for today. Thank you for coming, Coraline said, ending the briefing. As security moved swiftly on Jason, he was at least smart enough to consider his options of conveyance, walking out voluntarily, or being cuffed and carried like a luau pig. Thankfully for Core Inc., PR, he chose the former. Amongst the confusion, one last voice rang out. What was the other reason for the hat? That's an Eric Javits, right? A determined fashion blogger, Olivia, asked in a crisp, respectful tone. And saints be praised, she was using an actual pen and paper. It was endearing to Coraline, prompting a crooked smile just for her. Perhaps you, little fly. I'll have Core spin your file up later, Coraline thought as she admired the flare of heat now coming off of a previously subdued Olivia. Why? Because it's going to rain, silly, Coraline replied casually. And with that, she placed the glossy black hat back on her head as the solitary lock curled demurely into its cave, the orange glow fading. But it's clear skies, well, except for that. Olivia pointed up at the single light gray puff. Coraline smiled. She had been chatting with Harold just hours ago while choosing the perfect hat and watching the miniature 3D modeling of the high winds and rain. Cor had forecast the freak storm, making quite the mess of the amphitheater right about now. Perfect, she had said about the hat, the storm, and Harold as she kissed him. Coraline's happy memory was interrupted by a white-hot bolt of lightning striking past the amphitheater, yet closer than the crowd would have liked. Then thunder shook their feet so vehemently that it felt like a minor earthquake. Everyone grabbed their gear frantically, recalled their drones, and stuffed them recklessly into whatever was closest. Then a squall of angry gray weather came out of nowhere, flipping skirts and snapping sleeves like locker room towels. The daylight suddenly fell to eclipse levels just as the sky cut loose with a diagonal maelstrom of hard spring rain, drenching people and plants alike. The plants were happy, the people not so much. Breaking her locked gaze with Olivia, Coraline turned, her hand reaching for Harold's with eager, fluttering fingers. Simultaneously, Harold's sis had already primed muscle fibers, nerves, and neurons, sending his arm in motion. Their hands met in a dizzying dance of AI-assisted free willpower and fulfillment of subconscious desires. Squeezing, they walked back towards their shiny glass castle. Meanwhile, Jason was being tossed out the front gate on his simple ass, and a fleet of self-driving cars transported the Soak reporters back to buzzing offices. The front doors closed behind the happy couple, and in that one beautiful moment, all the ancient history of mankind was sealed, if only temporarily, on the outside of Coraline's private little world.